You're watching The Legal Breakdown. So Glenn, a lot to talk about as far as Trump's prosecution in Fulton County, Georgia is concerned. Republicans have now seized on Fani Willis's affair as some vindication that Trump's prosecution is somehow illegitimate. So we're going to get to Fani in just a moment. But first, what impact will this whole Fani situation have on Trump's ongoing prosecution in Fulton County?
It will have zero impact in a court of law. The only place it may have any impact is in the court of public opinion. And, those folks who will never walk away from Donald Trump will continue to stick with him and will lash out at Fani Willis and anybody else who is a perceived enemy of Donald Trump. But at the end of the day, I don't think this will ultimately have any impact on the ongoing RICO prosecution down in Georgia. And this will probably be an issue in our rearview mirror within a week or two. And then, we'll be on to the next Trump attack of Fani Willis and everybody else who's trying to hold him accountable for his crimes.
Well, no, even if Fani wasn't on this case, and again, we're going to get to the merits of that in a moment, but would the prosecution against Trump continue?
It would. There's absolutely no reason why it wouldn't. The only way I see Fani Willis leaving this case is if, for whatever reason, she decided to step away from it, which I think is extraordinarily unlikely. But there would be no reason the prosecution wouldn't continue. The question would be who might step in as sort of the lead prosecutor or as the head of the prosecution team. And, that's open to debate. I will say, Brian, there's another case down in Georgia where D.A. Willis was actually conflicted off of the case. And I think there has been about 12 or 14 months that have gone by while they were debating who would be the next prosecutor or the next team to head up that particular case. So it does seem like there's no urgency in getting a new prosecution team put in place for that case, a completely different case. But I cite it only because, there is some downside potentially in the event they have to change the leadership of the Trump prosecution team, which again, I see as extremely unlikely.
Okay, so now to Fani. What happened in this whole situation, and how did her recent testimony impact things?
So what happened is she brought a number of special counsel onto the case, special prosecutors, and ended up having a personal relationship with one of them, Nathan Wade, after he had been brought on the team. Importantly, that doesn't provide any kind of a conflict. That doesn't work to the detriment or the prejudice of Donald Trump or his 18 criminal associates who are his charged co-conspirators in the Georgia RICO case. It may be a bad look atmospherically. It may be unwise to engage in personal relationships with members of the same team on which you're working, but it really doesn't provide any relief to any of the defendants in the RICO case. But of course, Fani Willis was dragged through the mud. She was made to testify. Her father came in to testify, to bolster, to support, to corroborate some of the testimony she gave. And the hearing is ongoing. It won't wrap up until early this week. But, I haven't seen anything as a former career prosecutor that has given me pause on the legal front. We can all question people's judgment and their decisions on a personal front, but I've seen nothing that would impact this case on the legal front.
Okay. Now, when can we expect Judge McAfee to actually make his final decision regarding Fani Willis's continued involvement in this case?
Yeah, great question. Only Judge McAfee knows how quickly he'll be in a position to rule. But, the hearing is supposed to wrap up in the next day or two. And then I would suspect he's going to take probably a couple of days to put together some findings of fact, some conclusions of law, and then he'll probably announce that from the bench and also issue a written opinion. I have a feeling we could see this whole issue resolved by, as early as later this week.
Okay, and of course, this all raises the question, because this is what Trump does with all of these prosecutions. Is there any way that he can seek to appeal this decision and delay this whole thing further?
I think the answer is no. I don't think this is an appealable decision pre-trial. So here's what's going to happen. Judge McAfee will undoubtedly issue some very thorough findings of fact, some entirely supported conclusions of law, supported by case law in Georgia. And Donald Trump and all of his criminal associates, his co-conspirators, will be able to appeal that, but not until after the trial concludes, after they've been sentenced, and then they'll be able to appeal that issue, Judge McAfee's pretrial ruling, together with every other issue they want to claim was, some mistake or some shortfall or some deficiency in the way the trial was conducted. So this should not slow things down at all.
Okay. Now, legal stuff aside, does this seem like a relatively minor thing that's just been blown out of proportion because Trump supporters are desperate to cling on to anything to present Donald Trump as the victim?
I'm not sure I'd put it in the relatively minor thing category. It's a concern because, look, if you're going to prosecute a former president of the United States for trying to steal an election from the people of Georgia, you probably want to make sure that you do not open yourself up to criticism in any way, even criticism that may not result in any legal relief going to the defendant. It may not work to the prejudice of the defendant, but I think even the prosecutors need to be aware of how the case plays in the court of public opinion, not just in the court of law, because it is in the court of public opinion that people will draw conclusions about the legitimacy of the process and the reliability of whatever result is reached, in the trial itself. So this is an unnecessary distraction that probably could have been and should have been avoided, but that's a very different question from whether there is any legal significance to the fact that Fani Willis ended up having a personal relationship for a period of time with one of the special counsel that she brought onto the team. The allegation that they had to combat was that, she was somehow financially benefiting from the fact that she was engaged in this personal relationship. And without going into the testimony chapter and verse, there seems to be no there when it comes to that allegation. And frankly, that would be the allegation that, if true, could actually result in some relief to the defendants because it could prove to be a conflict for Fani Willis.
Perfectly put. All right, well, obviously we'll stay on top of this issue and this case as both of them continue to progress. Hopefully we have an update on the Fani Willis situation in the next couple of days, to your earlier point, Glenn. So with that said, for those watching, if you want to follow along, please make sure to subscribe. The links to both of our channels are right here on the screen. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.